You might have tried walking backwards in Tears of the Kingdom before, only to be met with Link taking control and turning himself around. But there are actually ways to force him to walk backwards continuously by either using Ultra Hand or holding down guard. It is, however, extremely impractical because you can't glide backwards and you can't climb anything. At all. Even a small hill becomes a massive struggle. And there's been a challenge floating around recently made popular by DougDoug where you have to try and cross Hyrule in a completely straight line. I watched this and thought, I want to make it harder. I want to find out if you can cross Hyrule in a straight line whilst only travelling backwards. First, we need to pick a line. If you've watched DougDoug's video, he crosses off certain locations to avoid as they would seemingly be impossible to pass through. Areas such as Lake Hylia or Hyrule Castle for very understandable reasons. But my line goes directly through both of them. Not only will I have extremely limited traversal options, but I will also be going straight through two of the largest obstacles on the map. And I'll admit, if I was using Doug's rules, this would be flat out impossible. So for this version of the challenge, I've made some alterations. The main one being, I have access to these 3 runes, and only if needed, the help of any of the sages. With all this cleared up, I positioned myself at the start of my line and began my journey. The exact coordinate I've chosen for my line is -1295, so with a 5 pixel safeguard on either side, if I go outside of -1290 or -1300, I would have to restart. But luckily for me, the first part of this line is really easy and that wouldn't be happening.
I just went out the line.
Starting from now. After getting used to staying in line, I quickly arrived at our first major obstacle, Lake Hylia. This is the largest body of water in all of Hyrule, and to be honest, one of the only reason I picked this line was under the assumption that I could just swim halfway, rest in the middle and swim the second half. Which is kind of cheating because in the original straight line challenge, you're only supposed to have 1 stamina bar. But not even a maxed out stamina bar could get me to the middle island. So I had to try and find some other way across. Which kind of felt impossible. But there was one miracle on this line for us. On the way to the lake there is a lost Korok, and around him are all the parts needed to build a controllable car. Well, I thought maybe I could use this. I built a car, took it to the lake, fumbled it into the water and it wouldn't go anywhere. So I'm clearly not an engineer, but I was sure that if we could find something to put on the wheels that could propel the vehicle in the water, then we would be able to drive backwards across the lake. So I went back on my line and found 2 rocks. This would work, but my rocks kept despawning when I went to go and get the other one.
Where's my other rock? My rock's disappeared.
If only there was something else nearby that was a similar size to this rock.
We are moving slowly. We're moving. We're moving. Oh, we need to stay inside the line though. Oh, we are moving. Look how far we've come. We're about halfway there.
Okay, I felt a bit mean. I can honestly say I did not expect to be waterboarding at Korok at any point during this challenge. Whilst we slowly made our way across, I want to address the use of my battery. I know I've got a much larger battery than you would start with in the game, but I don't think it affects the legality of the run because I can just stop at any time to recharge like I do here. So it would still work, it would just take even longer than it already is.
He thought he was... The sigh he just gave me.
And somehow we made it halfway, which would be a great time to save so that I don't have to go through that again. But building this car comes with a price. If I was to save and reload, then my car would disappear. This means that at any point during crossing this lake, if I accidentally walk forwards or go out of line anywhere, I would have to restart all the way back to before I built the car. Fortunately for me, it was an easy walk across the island and a smooth drive across the other half. That was until my wheels started to flash at me. My wheels broke and my platform sank.
Okay.
And all of this was fine. I was close enough now that I could swim the rest of the way, but it meant I would have to leave the Korok that got us this far behind.
You're gonna have to stay there.
He deserves better, but the run must go on. Except it couldn't. As I swam to the shore, the steepness of the cliff ahead became clear to me.
I don't know how I'm gonna get past this, though.
In my current condition, there was no way I would be able to get up. I did have a small glimmer of hope when this Yiga Blade Master spawned because they have an ability which gives you a small updraft.
Would that save me?
If this got me over the cliff, I would have devoted the rest of my life to this line. Unfortunately, there was no way this would give me the height I needed to get over the cliff. Which was really disappointing, because I only knew of one other sure way of getting over. Which meant restarting my run, and 6 hours of progress down the train.
Let's go again. Yippee.
And I realised up until now I had been using a sword and a shield this whole time, which isn't allowed, so I went all the way back to the start of the line and started from scratch. If you don't know, I'm only allowed to use items that I pick up or find along the way. I headed back to the Korok, built my car, and made my way across the water again. But I was hit with the same problem. My tyres began to break. But before they could, I adopted a new method of creating stepping stones across the rest of the lake. And I am now realising I could have just done this the whole way across and saved a lot of time. Now that we were across with all the parts of my car, I could quite easily create an ascend elevator that I could just jump off onto the top of the cliff. And with that, our first major obstacle was complete, and I could finally save my game. Unfortunately, I did actually lose some footage here. When I jumped off and ran forward, I really didn't want to have to reset, so I stopped the recording to check if I went out of line at any point. And I didn't, so I decided I would just jump back down and do it properly.
Then when I realised I got it wrong, I turn around, I stop, and I go back down to do it properly.
Basically, just imagine this, but when I jump, I stop moving so that I just stand still when I land. And what you're watching now is a recreation of how I got past this monster camp. It really wasn't difficult. And we're back on our way. This next portion of the map is nice and flat, so it was quite easy. We managed to pick up 2 fire fruits on the way, and we found this rusty shield just before very narrowly being able to walk past this house. Behind the house was a tiny hill that I just couldn't get up, but luckily for me there was a huge metal door just lying in the house that I could pick up and make myself a lift with. Another difficult part of this section were these bokoblins. Usually I could just run past mobs and they would eventually run back to their camp, but these didn't have a camp and they just wouldn't leave me alone.
Shield broke. No. Okay. Right. I forget I have those on.
Eventually though, I did find a pretty foolproof way of dealing with them. And then I ate some spicy peppers. And we soon arrived at Lookout Landing. We weren't arriving at the main door, so I was a little concerned with how we would get in, but once again the line came in clutch and had a perfect overhang for us to ascend into, and then we could backflip off into the middle of Lookout Landing. And now we had the most mechanically challenging part of the line. Everything was leading up to this. The reason I never gave up on these exact coordinates, the reason I was crazy enough to do a straight line challenge directly through Hyrule Castle, was this tower. My plan from the start was not to go through the castle, it was to go over it. And you may remember me saying at the start, gliding backwards isn't possible. So how would I go about gliding over the castle? Well, I had 3 potential methods in mind. The first was to never open my glider and just dive backwards the whole time. I found that this floating island is pretty much bang on my line, so when I first reached my height limit, I would line myself up with this island and start going backwards from there. This was by far the easiest method, but distance-wise, it didn't get us very far. The second method was by far the best. It consists of gliding as far as I can before Link fully turns round, and then diving to realign myself quickly and repeat that process over and over again, but unfortunately this only managed to get us to the bottom layer of the castle. And from here there was no way of getting over the giant chasm. And the third method kinda sucked. It involved trying to control Link whilst gliding the whole time so that he never turns around. But this made it practically impossible to stay in the line. So I had kinda run out of options. I tried the second method again, but this time with Chulin as support to try and hopefully gain a bit more distance. Which I did, and I made it to roughly the second layer of Hyrule Castle, but from here there was this waterfall that was impossible to get past. As disappointing as it is, this was the end of the run. There was no way of going over Hyrule Castle backwards. Except, there was one way. You might have missed it, but when I explained the rules at the start, I very clearly stated that I was allowed to use 1 armor set. Don't bother going back to check it, I can assure you it's there. So what armor set is so amazing that I can save this run? A full gliding set increases your mobility whilst diving a lot. And with this, using the second method, I was able to get enough height and distance to land on the very top layer of Hyrule Castle.
Okay, I just checked. We stayed on the line the whole time, which means we can save it here and go from here.
All I had to do from there was walk to the edge and jump down to the line below.
And now we have conquered the castle.
With a bit of rule bending, Hyrule Castle was complete and we could finally move on to the next part of the line, which I heavily underestimated. Every time I achieved something, an even more difficult challenge presented itself. This was a huge undersight on my part. When choosing this line, I looked at this end area and thought I could approach it similar to how I intended to cross Lake Hylia. Swim one half, rest in the middle and swim the other half. What the map doesn't show me is how steep the edges around the water are. But before that, we had to get past this little hill. Now, just walking backwards, I couldn't get up. But if you are using Ultra Hand, the game is a lot more lenient on what you can and can't walk up. So if I drop my rusty shield and carry it with Ultra Hand, I can just walk straight up. and I had to use this until I reached the water because my line was just out of reach of the top of the cliff, so I had to precariously scoot alongside the edge, and I could just barely manage it.
We've done it. We have done it on staying on 300. But not that time. Look, I know it's possible because I've
But when I got to the water and started swimming, I realised the true impossible task of this line. What I thought would be a great resting place became my biggest burden. There was absolutely no way I could get up and around this island, and for the third time, I thought this was the end of my run.
And this run is not possible.
But I wouldn't give up. Even though I already technically cheated, I still wanted to reach the end by any means necessary. So I went all the way back to my save on top of Hyrule Castle to see if there is anything at all that might help me get across. And you will not believe, directly on my line, there is a random ledge sticking out of the land, and on it a Lysel boomerang and shield. This single weapon placed on this random ledge was exactly what I needed to save this run, because with this I now had the power to chop down trees. I found this one tree that was just about on my line, and then I found out that if I throw my weapon and use Ultran to bring it back to me, I could chop down these two other trees. I now had 3 large fallen logs, 2 pine cones and 1 Korok frond. I attached them all together and took them to the water. My first thought was I could make a raft and use the Korok frond to blow me across, but this didn't work. However, as I was trying this, I found out that although this current looked really strong, it actually wasn't moving my logs at all, which meant I could easily just bridge across by taking one log from the front and moving it to the back over and over again. And then when I reached the island, I could use the logs to elevate my way up.
Okay. Oh my gosh. There's hands. There's hands. They'll kill me straight away.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The line just doesn't want me to succeed. There is no way I could get past them. Going backwards is just way too slow. I calculated my options and eventually decided that theoretically, up until now, it's possible that in one of the infinite realities, I have made it this far taking no damage. So I did a quick reality shift and all of a sudden, I'm on full hearts. I grabbed my logs and made a break for it.
Oh, they're already here, they're already here, they're already here. Okay, they're already here. I'm already in them. I'm already in them. Okay, they've got me.
But they still got me and I went into full-blown panic mode.
Give me my wood, give me my wood, give me my wood. No, give me my wood, give me my wood, give me my wood. I'm off the line. I'm off the line. I'm off the line. They can get me down here. Go, 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 go. Just run, just run, just run. Back on the line, back on the line. Why did they have to be there?
This was not my finest display. I had to reset. But as you know, things you build don't get saved, so I had to go back all the way to before I chopped down the trees. I gathered my wood again and headed back, ready to face my doom. But this time, they weren't there.
There's no gloom hands this time. They're not here.
It turns out that on this island, either the deadly gloom hands of Phantom Ganon can spawn, or this guy can, who doesn't seem to mind me being on the island at all, and I could just walk straight past. But I could only bring 2 logs with me for the second part. It was still enough though that I could reach the other side. I made myself a quick elevator with the logs, and luckily for me, there was this flat patch of land on my line where I could take a bit of a breather. This was it, my final challenge. If I can get to the top of this mountain, it's nothing but a nice downhill walk the rest of the way. But that is a big if. And I was struggling to find a way up until I remembered the items that I had picked up along the way. I had 2 fire fruits and 2 pine cones I could use, and 1 big log left in my reach. I broke it and it dropped me 2 piles of wood. This was perfect. This meant I had 2 pocket updrafts I could use to help me get up this hill. I used my first one and it got me to this little ledge that had a rock on it. Using the Ultra Hand technique on the rock, I could walk a bit more of the way up. But eventually got stuck on this ledge. It didn't quite seem high enough that an updraft would get me to the top, but I had no other choice. I made my final campfire and glided up, but I couldn't really get anywhere with it. I only really had one other option at this point, and that was to use Tulin. And I know I said I was allowed to, but I had got this far without using any of them, so it was a bit disappointing that I needed him at the very last hurdle. However, with his help, we were able to reach the top of the hill.
We just did it. That just did it.
And finally, the finish line was in sight. I did some sick backflips down this mountain in celebration, and just as I thought all my suffering was over, the most inconveniently placed boulders was in between me and the end of my line. This line truly has pushed me to my limit every single step of the way, and now I had one final obstacle to pass.
I'm gonna fail here.
I found this rock, and after many minutes of rinse and repeat,
Do a side jump.
eventually I got it just right so that I could hop over to the top of the boulder.
Yes!
And now we had done it.
Oh, we did it. We did it. Oh my gosh.
We took our final steps to the end of the line and backflipped off full of pride. I know I technically cheated using the armor, but I couldn't help feel like I've accomplished something. There were so many times it seemed impossible,
Finally
but
face
a
forward.
few small miracles came together and helped us achieve this straight line directly through the center of Hyrule, traveling backwards every step of the way. Thank you so much for watching. I'm still new to all of this, so it really does mean a lot to me.